Good morning, everyone. Big thank you to everyone from Standard Bank, Liberty, the whole group, really for coming through. And just want to check where we are. Right. Running a bit late here. So a very big thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your day to coming through and actually, the ambition for today is that everyone walks away, including ourselves, having learned something. And that if everyone can say, I learned one thing today, I would be very, very delighted with that outcome. So let us begin. So I'll start by testing this clicker. So just a brief agenda. So I'll be running through an introduction about us, the AI opportunity, something we call the Band 8 problem, Pygio Assembly, and then the so what. What does this all mean? What does data and AI mean? How is this going to affect the enterprise? So I'll start off with probably the biggest question that many of you have, which is who is Pygio? Who are these guys, right? So we are the AI-enablement company. We're an extension and a very close partner to Snowflake, obviously, and our big aspiration is to enable enterprises, particularly in financial services, telco, retail, and energy, to become AI-enabled and accelerate certain use cases in a cost-effective, scalable, maintainable way, which I'll get to in a little bit. So, founded not too long ago. So our market cap isn't in the order of magnitude of Standard Bank and Snowflake, not yet. But kind of 50 clients across the globe, that being Africa, Middle East, UAE, and then the US as well. So our team spans across 7 time zones, leveraging the bulk of our management team in South Africa and sitting here in Joburg, but then very much leveraging a global talent capability, which we've spent a lot of time invested in over the last couple of years. And then across our team, we have a deep expertise across 150 technologies. We're a very data science, data engineering heavy company. So much so that in fact many of us had to go out and actually buy a suit today and polish our shoes because we didn't have that before the session. So that's a little bit about us. I want to just kind of take a moment to paint a picture of where we're at in compute, in AI, how did we get here, and try and summarize about 100 years of history into 30 seconds. So data science is actually a relatively new industry. So only in about the early 1900s, 1920s, did data science actually start becoming a formal mathematical field of study. In fact, some of the earliest, and I know this from my time as studying natural science back at Wits, some of the earliest pioneers, in fact, are still to this day professors at the University of Wits. So South Africa has had an instrumental, people don't know this, but South Africa has had an instrumental, responsibility and play in the international data science community, Professor Gauss. And I believe he's still alive. So, fast forward from the 20s from the 1900s to 2005, we started to see early use cases of classical narrow machine learning and AI use cases. So you start to see things like projecting sales and forecasting revenue and looking at costs and building these narrow AI machine learning systems. We then kind of moved forward about 10 years. And really it's companies like Google who were the pioneers in this space, inventing the tensor and publishing that paper and inventing the TPU, the tensor processing unit, which is, for those who don't know, driven a lot of the compute innovation behind AI at the moment. And this is where we kind of started seeing the advent of massive recommendation engines that affect all of us today. So in your retail space, you've got products being recommended to you all the time. Think about, this is the early days of kind of Uber and Uber Eats and platforms that we all know and love and suck a lot of our time, like Instagram and TikTok and this is the early stage of kind of deep learning where these algorithms start to really understand video and image. And then something amazing, crazy happened, and a real step change in the data science and AI world. And I'll never forget where I was, because it was like one of those moments for me. I'll never forget where I was. I was at home. I had a mouthful of food, and someone sent me I was eating dinner, and someone sent me an article about a completely AI, which sounds so trivial today, but a completely AI written text. And you read this article. It was like it was OpenAI's GPT. I think it was version 1 or 2, whatever it was, which wasn't released to the public yet. And the food literally fell out of my mouth. I was flabbergasted. This seemed like an adolescent or a teenager had actually written this article. And that spawned, obviously, in November 2022, the advent of the ChatGPT moment, which I think has changed the way that humans will forever think and do work and interact with compute and with using these tools. But where our company really has started to, for the longest time since our inception, has been invested in is in what's happening now, moving from a GenAI space to an agentic space, leveraging and building out the next phase of this AI wave, which is building out agents and agentic AI systems. And I'll touch on where we're going with this in a minute. So, with a lot of the investment now at the foundation model providers being along the lines of chain of thought architectures and reasoning. So now it's a matter of, with just GenAI, just very chat-based. I have questions, I want answers. Now we're moving into a phase, and this is where Pygio's major thesis is built on, is how do we give these models context and the ability to act? So actually fulfilling work for us. And that is the big thesis of Pygio. So how big is this opportunity? It's pretty big. By some accounts, the IMF, PwC, I'm sure a lot of you will have seen this number. So $15.7 trillion market opportunity by 2030. That's just 5 years away of GDP growth, effectively, or AI growth, just in the next 5 years. I mean, that's an incredible statistic. It's so big. It's it's the size of Germany, Japan, and the UK's economies combined. This is by far the biggest commercial opportunity of our time. Maybe only like the internet, and we all know how that turned out. So, it's all good and well talking about the global opportunity, but I think as Africans, as South Africans, and especially for Standard Bank, where Africa is our home, it's really important to hyper-localize these solutions that have often been developed in Silicon Valley or some global lab somewhere to the market here. And Ilona, thank you for your question. There's a lot of work happening in research labs, to build AI specific to the South African and African markets. So just to cut out and depict the picture of how big is the African opportunity, it's about of that 15.7 trillion, which is a massive, kind of mind-blowing number. What is Africa going to benefit from that in the next, 5 years? So we're going to move effectively from this number, where effectively our data and AI, the market size of the data and AI is across Africa at about 4.5 billion, to this number in 5 years, which is about 75% compound annual growth rate. That is absolutely mind-blowing. And it's very important to note, and it's very key for us all to understand, and I really want to address this kind of elephant in the room, which is AI going to take our jobs? And I just want to pause there and say that unequivocally, to my core, I don't believe, and the company doesn't believe that's even within the realm of possibility within the next 20, 30 years. If it does, maybe we're all out of a job. But the reality is, as one of my kind of inspiring, personalities, Balaji, I don't know if anyone follows him, as he says, humans are really great end to end, AI is really great middle to middle. what this represents for Africa and South Africans is an opportunity to grow 230 million digital jobs by some accounts by that time, 2030. And what this means is that the nature of work is going to change. People's daily jobs, the type of work, the busy work, the kind of swivel chair movements that we all do and hate about, when we get in the car to go to work or get in a taxi to go to work. Those are the things that we dread doing. AI will be middle to middle and replace a lot of that work, so we can focus on strategic, creative, exciting things with our day and really get more out of our lives. I just want to make a kind of a bold statement, which is that AI is not just transforming banking, it is creating an entirely new ecosystem where Standard Bank's leadership position depends on decisive action today. And I want to localize this again to Standard Bank and say that you as Standard Bank are the leaders, not just in South Africa as the biggest bank on the continent, but across about 20, maybe more opcos. Many millions, tens of millions of Africans depend on your services and trust your brand. And to maintain that position, I think it's absolutely critical for us all to have this conversation about how do we leverage this technology? How do we leverage it to make Standard Bank better, to improve your customers' lives? And that's the conversation that we want to be having with you. So, there's a bit more to get through, so I'll speed up a bit. So, if we look at, since that magical, step change ChatGPT moment, there's been a lot of experimentation. We're only at the S-curve, the beginning of the S-curve of what's happening with AI and the investment that's going to be going into it. However, unfortunately, as with any new technology and any trial by error and experimentation, there have been some spurious results. And this has culminated in what we call the Band-Aid problem. We'll explain this in a bit. So the Band-Aid problem is effectively the attempt by many companies to superficially and tactically tackle AI and deploy these systems into their enterprise. So superficial and tactical use, when in actual fact, this should be almost like a board level, a CEO level, a C-level kind of driven decision. And I'll tell you why some of the data that kind of has shown why this is a big problem. So effectively what's happened is that safe pilots never really see the light of day, they never deliver value, or they never get into production, which is causing this slight distrust with these AI systems. It pays to rip the Band-Aid off. So to move from reactive to become proactive and be thought leaders in this space. Or very likely, to be displaced by someone who is. And I don't mean that just in our daily, kind of life of working as individual contributors, but the entire company having our lunch eaten. That is not something that we ever want to contemplate. So some of the data around, this is pretty shocking, right? And it's interesting me standing up here with you today saying, this is what our company does, believe us, it works, when actually 95% of AI pilots since 2022, since the ChatGPT moment, GenAI pilots have failed. Only 5% have yielded results. And I hazard a guess to say most of those clients are Snowflake clients. Most of those results are Snowflake clients. And it's probably for the reasons that I'm going to get into in a bit. So since 2022, $30 to $40 billion of investment has gone into creating generative AI systems. So that's systems that you can ask questions and speak back to. And the results have been, as I said, pretty spurious. So only 5% really affecting the bottom line in a positive way, if it was a revenue accretive task, or some cost-saving optimizations. So that's a pretty ugly story. But we as Pygio have a solution. The solution that we've devised and spent many, many hours, man-hours, financial resources, R&D. We've got a team of about 6 PhD data scientists and engineers that have been working on this problem tirelessly for the last couple of years. I don't think it's on the order of magnitude of Snowflake. I think you've got 600, so we're getting there. Give us some time. But we've developed an answer to this band-aid problem, which is effectively what we call Pygio Assembly. An assembly is a very tightly knit, integrated set of services, products, and it's a framework and pipeline that sits on top of Snowflake. Okay? Let me get into a little bit about how we tackle this. Before I do that, I just want to address, kind of going back to the slide. I think it's important. Skipped over something. Some of the reasons why these AI pilots have failed, I think it's critical to just cover this as we talk about assembly. Some of the reasons why these AI pilots have failed, just painting the picture here. Number one is executive buy-in. So I kind of touched on that. I think a lot of people in this room are very hungry, but we all know that getting executive buy-in budgets is quite a difficult thing to do. So somehow we have to align the business interest with what the technical teams and the product teams want to be doing. The second problem is very much around data silos. So data silos, data quality. I think some of the stats around this show that 95% of human beings know when they look at a data set, they understand the people that actually work in that business unit. They work with that data daily. They understand what the data infers. But when in the reality, if you ask a machine, only a bit between 20 to 30% of explainability comes out of looking at that data if it's not structured in the right place. So data quality is a big issue. And then the third reason is system sprawl. So we have all of the last kind of 20 plus 30 years when these cloud and SaaS solutions came into play. All of these systems have been built in isolation. So you've got your Salesforce, you've got ServiceNow, you've got SAP. All of these systems were built as point solution specialists, and they become massive. And there is a lot of work that makes them interoperable. But they were never really truly designed to work together. Okay, so you've got those three issues. Coming back to assembly, which is Pygio's, this is our baby, and this is what we believe will assist enterprises to become AI ready. I just want to get into the big idea and actually define. So now I get into the meat of what assembly actually does and what it can potentially do for a bank, right? So the big idea is to define the bank's core concepts once. So that means customers, transactions, accounts, support, queries, all of the pricing models, define the verbs, the nouns, the knowledge bases, the databases, the workflows. Define that into basically a business ontology and link them, every single workflow, so that you can then start building models and applications on top of that. So think of this as a business-aware interface for AI for your data, that shared meaning, that digital brain for your entire company. Now, this is a very big and bold undertaking. It's a big, kind of thing to stand up here and say, we can potentially, and now with this new emerging technology, once and for all, build a taxonomy for your entire business across the whole group. Very, very difficult to actually do that. And human beings are actually pretty bad at building maps. We're pretty bad at describing things in mathematical ways. So let's look at assembly at a deeper dive. Of course, this is all powered by and operated on top of Snowflake, but we use our own IP. We have built our own accelerators, and effectively we start off by using our own discovery and ingestion tool to come in and understand your business ontology. So given the systems that we have access to, the databases that we have access to, we've developed a tool that effectively comes in using graph neural nets and graph technologies, can start to actually identify and map out all of these very intricate relationships between the assets in your business. Not only that, it also can help identify workflows that are not obvious to business and relationships that are not obvious immediately to business. Okay, these are all represented in a mathematical, machine-readable, human-readable way. So you have to make sure that you can tackle both parts of this problem. I'm very happy that and I want to link this to what my colleague Chris said earlier around Snowflake Cortex, that 90% stat is super important. But without the ability for a team to come in and build this business ontology and semantic layer, without that governance layer, and without us actually being a part of the team and trying to map this out, that it's going to be very difficult to get to those 999, that 99.999% accuracy. Assembly is effectively the accelerator for that growth. So, just speaking a little bit about how we approach the concept of a bank, is if you can squash a bank into a couple of circles, which you can't obviously, but we think about a bank from the inside out. So your immutable, absolutely deterministic systems, which we know that we're very kind of scared to touch, and they run, and they are absolutely the most critical part of a bank. Your core ledger, your treasury function, your card management system, your switch. These are systems that are deterministic and are the foundation for the bank. We then move to the innermost, to the middlemost kind of layer there. And this is where AI is going to be the most effective, at least in the short term. So this is your workflow layer. This is where things like pricing, risk, loan management, all of these human-based operations, card operations, branch operations, payment ops. This is where the efficiencies are ready, and the lowest hanging fruit for us to start looking into and building these ontologies around. This is where we effectively start. So then we come to the outermost layer here, which is the bank's interface with the rest of the world. This is how your customers interface with you, be it branch, be it mobile, be it web, or for your bigger customers via API. That's how the world sees Standard Bank and Liberty by extension. This is our kind of mental model of how we build an ontology framework for a bank. Once we have this kind of business discussion with your teams, as we always say, your AI strategy follows your business strategy. It's actually less of a technical, well, it's as much a business conversation as it is a technical conversation. So with having this ontology, this taxonomy, this dictionary in place, we can then get really smart about obviously ingesting the data sources from various kind of systems, be it Oracle or SAP or MySQL or whatever is kind of used, and there's ways to do this while maintaining the use of those systems. From there, we look at obviously then honing in on using the ontology to map out those workflows and really start to think about the agentic workflow assisting the human being. So how do we assist the human workflow in a way that's easy to govern and easy to scale, and that's traceable, and it's got all of these metrics in place. From there, we have a retrospective view, and this is really starting to get into the meat of Snowflake, where anything and everything that once your data is in this environment, you can quite easily start to query data and retrospectively look at what has happened in our business. So analytics and monitoring, building out dashboards, it becomes so easy. And again, to Chris's point, Snowflake was founded on this principle, this core principle, which we love, on simplicity, right? Then we come to this section here, which is your models and your proactive view of the world. How do we look at our customers in a different way? How do we build out forecasting tools? How do we do pricing models? How do we guess what's going to happen in the future such that we can plan today to start to invest? And this is, again, why Standard Bank should be leading in this space. With our assembly framework on top of Snowflake, this becomes so much easier. It assists your teams to become more creative, more strategic, and have the software and the AI do the work for you. And ultimately, very critically, as you'll see in many of the talks today, Snowflake is not built to be an everything platform. By no means is it that. Neither is assembly. Okay, this is the center of gravity of data and in your organization. So this is effectively the digital brain. But as I said, the system's not built to be in isolation. It has to speak very well with, I think there was a question around this, speak very well to other systems. So that interoperability, the ability to serve data to other SaaS systems and systems of record, which is critical, becomes so much easier. And what actually ends up happening, and what we found in our experience, is your investment in these other platforms, be it Salesforce or ServiceNow, or any other service management tool, becomes so much higher. Your ROI in these platforms becomes so much higher. Why? Because now your data is in a secure, maintainable, easy to use, easy to understand, easy to manipulate way that's powered by Snowflake and Pygio Assembly. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but there's probably a bigger conversation to be had around assembly, and I'll get to kind of what this actually looks like in kind of very raw terms. But to try and map out in terms of an actual service offering and a product offering, effectively we ingest and look at multiple data sources. We connect native apps and look at both internal and external data sources. So, obviously a very big initiative for many financial services institutions is to look at alternative credit data and not just credit data, but looking at alternative data in general. So retail data, vehicle data. How do we better understand our customers? The ultimate question. So being able to integrate external data sources happens seamlessly with Snowflake. And in fact, if your customers are on Snowflake, that's even easier. We then obviously have a massive job to do, which is around the kind of the raw data phase. So getting all of this mass data to actually be useful, maintain this data, clean the data, and we'll get to a little bit of that in a couple of seconds. But getting this into a usable format. From there, as Chris said, building out your semantic layer, which has become absolute critical for AI. And then, touching on some of the points I said, kind of how do we maintain and make sure that your data is standardized and cleansed, perform, entity resolution, making sure that your data is in a safe, secure, maintainable way. I've touched on enrichment, which is obviously speaking to, we as part of our data journey, we've spent a lot of time looking at and building commercial relationships at Pygio with other third-party providers to assist our customers where there's like kind of data or missing data where we need enrichment providers. So we have a bunch of commercial relationships, that being in, as I said earlier, vehicle finance. It might be a TransUnion, it might be GIS data. We might pull sources on PII, which is obviously very tricky around how you actually perform those data ingestions. From there, we then start to and in tandem, this is now happening in tandem, we start to map out this knowledge graph and that ontology. Once this is all in place, it then becomes completely seamless at the drop of a hat. You can spin up a model, you can perform a report, and we're going to show you some of that in a little bit. But just kind of in the interest of time, I'm not going to speak too much about that now. And ultimately, again, to hammer the point home, it's to be able to integrate this data and these workflows, these pipelines, these agents into your other applications. So what is an ontology? It's a pretty new and interesting, not new, it's the concept that's been around for a long time, but in our context, it's an ontological framework built on graph neural nets. So effectively, an ontology-first AI is the ability to build a business dictionary and effectively drawing out these diagrams. So it defines the business terms and the relationships to power search, analytics, self-explanatory apps. So an ontology as an API concept, apps interact with meaningful data. For example, how do you map the relationship between customers and transactions? And we'll get into a very exciting use case along the lines of transactional monitoring in a later session. But effectively, this ontology then becomes the guardrails for your agents to be able to replicate work the way you would as a human, okay? And trying to get to those triple nines of accuracy. So we haven't done like this. We haven't come up with it on our own. We've leveraged and always like to use best practices as far to the extent that they exist. In the telco space, we use a framework that's widely adopted called ITIL. In the banking space, we use a framework called FIBO, which is Financial Industry Business Ontology Framework. And effectively, this is the makings of how we actually get to an industry standard and for these things to conform. So that when you actually go to another financial services institution, you now have one language that both are speaking. So interoperability of agents between institutions, between business units becomes so much easier. I'm not going to get into the kind of details of that right now, but you're probably all looking at me and saying, so what? Like, what is the point of assembly? Why are these guys investing in building these out? What is the value? How does this relate to AI? And I just want to touch on a few key value drivers. So, from an outcome domain perspective, we'll look at kind of pre-memory challenge and pre-AI memory challenge and post-AI memory challenge, memory advancement, So, we want to take effectively a look at certain metrics, and when we sit with and understand and unpack the business requirements, we look at these kind of key guiding principles. So other than response rate, for accuracy and interoperability, again, that's where the agentic, the ontological framework comes in and improves, gets you from that 90% to the 999s. There's a lot of work to get that done. So moving from uncertain retrievals from silos, breaking down those silos, and then obviously letting your AI speak to each other. Human analyst navigation. So what takes, and I know this is a big challenge for many teams, and probably before AI, this was totally a fantasy dream, but the ability to go out and source and dig through treasure troves of data sources to perform and cross-reference data sets to do analytics now can be done within seconds in a matter of a query. Compliance traceability, so very important is, when you're sharing documents, who sees what? How do we mask policies? How do we make sure the right people are seeing the right data at the right time? How do we give people access without burdening compliance to make sure that a business unit can share data with another business unit? Make that completely traceable and easy to understand. So we move from manual clause hunts into an instant provenance links. Okay, so you can see this in your Snowflake environment using Snowflake Horizon, which some of our gentlemen, my colleagues, will actually speak about in a bit. And then I think a really important kind of point here is around support efficiency, and this speaks to how we interact with our customer service effectively. So both from a revenue accretive way, how do we interact with customers when they apply for a new loan, for example, and also in a support way. How do we make sure AI understands, if you think of a call center, how do we make sure that AI understands the triaging that happens? How many times has it happened to you? I'm sure this happens to you, as many of you, if not all of your standard bank customers, when you call the call center and it says, you have an EFT problem, but you accidentally routed to the cards division, and then there's a whole routing problem. If your ambition is to then use AI to replace or augment those teams, you have to give it context into that entire triaging process. So ultimately reducing handoffs for complex queries. And so as a company that's really engrossed and embedded in understanding our customers, we have to develop and speak to a certain point of view. We have, as third parties to the bank, we have the one benefit of being external is that we see what happens across the market. So we see what happens at all of the banks. We see what happens at all of the telcos. And so we have a unique bird's eye view of what happens in the market and can therefore make these kind of decisions to invest in certain accelerators. So we've developed, and we'll showcase two of these for you today, some use cases built on top of Snowflake and Pygio Assembly in transactional monitoring, We'll show you how to build an actuarial advisor agent using very kind of dumbed down techniques. And then credit underwriting, which we won't be showing today, but can at a later stage show. And then obviously the acceleration of pricing and risk calculations. I've said a lot. I think we're going to wrap up and just say a couple of kind of big value drivers in terms of what this framework, what does Snowflake enable you to do, what does Pygio Assembly, if you walk along this journey together, if we walk along this journey together, what value drivers is Pygio Assembly and Snowflake going to drive for you? So the definition of one business language and one business ontology. So we speak about this alignment problem in AI. This Terminator problem. Is AI going to come and kind of, come eat our lunch in a couple of years? That alignment between the AI and human is critical, and this is the step one in our journey together to kind of create that one language and make sure that the AI is aligned to our business objectives. Accelerate these workloads. So by our data and by our kind of, based on our experience, we believe and have seen that with the implementation of assembly, you can improve your model accuracy by 4.2x. Now that is a pretty impressive result. We've got lots of data and case studies around this and how we actually get to the meat of getting us from that incredible 90% that Snowflake offers to the 999 or the 999 figure. As you can expect, being in a highly regulated space, trust, governance, compliance to the forefront of absolutely anything we do, and is the big reason why we chose Snowflake as our partner. It's trust first, simplicity first, but also governance first, and that's absolutely critical in a highly regulated environment. And then ultimately, what we are here to say is that this train is running away from us. We need to get onto the train today. And I can't sit here and tell you that I'm not going to be able to deliver results for you in anything under, if I sit here and say to you, I'm going to get your AI strategy done in 2 years, well, the ship's already sailed. We need to deliver value today. We can prove that we can do that within 8 weeks. Start to build out this ontology, start to build out and understand and map these use cases for you within 8 weeks. I think that concludes my speech for today. I'm really, really grateful again. Just want to say a massive thank you to everyone in the room. Thank you for being here, taking the time out of your day. Thank you to Snowflake, and yeah, open to questions.
There are no immediate questions.
Cool.
Oh no, we've got a couple. Have we got a mic we can run around the room?
Someone there?
Yeah, one over there. I think there's one in the middle there as well.
Good morning. Just checking the time there. Thanks you again for the presentation. This was very, very insightful. From my side, I'd just like to understand one or two things from your side. So the projection of that 30 trillion, and then you now say that, okay, we now have 95% as inefficient. In fact, the models, the AI models are being built, being used as sitting in a sandbox. Is that 5% essentially equal, projecting that 5% benefit, projecting that 30 trillion that you had?
So the numbers were effectively looking at Fortune 500 spend on GenAI since basically November 2022 when ChatGPT came out. So these Fortune 500 companies effectively have spent over the last 3 years $30 to $40 billion by some estimates. The source is an MIT study that came out probably about a month ago, and we can send a link to all of this afterwards for your reading and discovery. So of that spend, 95% of it yielded no measurable change to the P&L. That was the definition of that stat. So only 5% of those projects actually reached production and yielded either, like a profit or a cost reduction on the P&L. So that was the definition around that.
So essentially what you're saying is you're seeing from your customers, based on the models that you have seen that materiality benefit from your customers, saying that, okay, this is the benefit we've had a return on investment when we've used this product.
Yeah, spot on. So what we're saying is that because what's happened is effectively these models return very often kind of spurious results or hallucinate. Not very often, but it does happen. And in an environment, especially in a highly regulated environment or an environment where there's zero margin for room for error, you cannot have that. So anything that's slightly above 0% room for error yields a failure. Okay, so in those highly kind of absolute examples, it's difficult to get these AI systems to actually work and prove value. But what we're saying in other environments where there's slightly more room for error, in triaging support where it's not mission critical, that's where AI can start to deliver a lot more value. And what we're saying is to effectively shift that needle. So speaking about that 5% of projects that are successful, shifting that from 5% to 80%. Because with any implementation, especially new technology, you are going to have some risk of failure. But I cannot stand here today in front of you and say that anything that we put in front of you has a very high chance of failure. It doesn't bode well with us. So we've developed Assembly to effectively answer, that's the Band-Aid problem, to answer that question of how do we now, okay, everyone is all in on AI, how do we actually effectively get there? How do we get to a state where these systems are much more reliable? In fact, more reliable than what you trust your colleague. So that's that 4.2 X model improvement is what we're getting at.
Thank you very much. Just the very last question is,
sure.
In terms of security, because the way I understand that GenAI has always had the same three problems. The first one you said was abstraction, the other was hallucination, and the last one is security in terms of threats from prompt injections. Are you guys able to solve those kind of problems in your existing models?
So I think my colleagues earlier touched on the points around in Snowflake, and this is again why we chose Snowflake as the leading platform and best of breed platform to do this. We went about the very same question you've just asked. We went about thinking about this in 2022. How do we implement these AI, these large language foundation models? And what we actually converged on is that you need an enterprise data warehouse to house these things. And very quickly, within us realizing that, Snowflake started obviously enabling the functionality to pull in your models and run them yourself. So as my colleague said earlier, there's no risk of any of your data leaving your environment. All is housed within Snowflake. Your other question, prompt injections. Look, you have the ability to build your own models, right? So you have full traceability around what has happened to get to pre-training and post-training, so you can actually identify any risk of that happening. And I would say that if you run it in Snowflake again, you remove that risk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the presentations, I think, from both Snowflake.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I think it's amazing to see just how digital economy is accelerating and how you guys are actually contributing to this. But I think we all are aware that there's some challenges that AI journey or the digital economy journey is coming with, and some of those are bias and ethical usage of data. So my question to you, and perhaps to Snowflake as well, is how are you addressing, like what type of governance methodology or frameworks are you using to address bias and ethical usage of data?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think that is just that bias problem is not just unique to foundation models. Any data scientist will tell you that any model has inherent bias. So this has been an age-old question that's been tackled kind of time and time again. I think it's honestly a matter of, it's actually the answer's probably not what you're looking for, but it's more of a human answer in developing a discipline and a practice around ensuring, that you are constantly retraining and looking at model drift and looking at how validating your outcomes, backtesting your models, making sure that you're constantly validating and checking these things. So I think it's more of a process question and a culture question than an actual hard answer to a technology, because this is never going to go away. This issue of bias is never going to go away. And so what we're saying is to develop this competence, develop this discipline within your organization, which you already do have, we know this, but to foster that and grow it so that you can, to the best extent possible, remove bias. So, yeah, I hope that somehow answers your question.
So it goes back to humans should also be involved in this.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, who's going to build all of this stuff?
Speaking of human intervention, I think we all need a little break. So if there's any other questions, maybe we'll take them during break time, afterwards, any point in the day. But yeah, big thank you to Dimitri for that.
Thank you very much.